11 a.m. on the East Coast. Some of the Americans stuck in the Middle East are finally starting to return to the United States. I'm Maritza Giorgio, and this is Morning Rush. This comes days after the war with Iran left hundreds of thousands stranded in combat regions. Now, the State Department announced the first U.S.-facilitated charter flight departed Wednesday, with more expected in the coming days. An American comedian stuck in Dubai says he's struggling to get information about flights and says his anxiety is through the roof.
The situation at this point is that I watch the news and I'm being gaslit by the press secretary of the United States saying it's my fault that I'm in this situation, when honestly the actions of the government put me in this situation. And now there's no information at all about when there's going to be a charter flight.
This is happening across the country, and President Trump suggested on Tuesday that there was no evacuation plan because the war unfolded too quickly. But we are seeing posts from across the United States of people trying to get loved ones home. Meanwhile, it's written in the Constitution that presidents need congressional approval before declaring war, but nearly every Republican voted against a measure Wednesday that would have blocked Trump from continuing without their approval. The majority sticking behind the president, despite him running his presidential campaign as the anti-war candidate.
I think the ultimate goal here is to get a government that we don't have to worry about them nuking somebody, and that's been the ultimate concern with this regime. You know, their leadership always spoke in this, end times, using nuclear weapons to bring the end times here. That's scary.
Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky is the only Republican who voted to limit the president's powers. Meanwhile, the House is set to vote on this issue later today. Gas prices are now the highest they've been in 11 months. AAA says regular now averages $3.25 a gallon. The jump even worse for diesel. Prices are climbing as the war with Iran restricts oil supplies. And get this, wholesale costs suggest the increases are not over yet. So the crisis in the Middle East appears to be spreading to even more countries right now. More news unfolding. Azerbaijan now vowing retaliation after it says they were hit by 2 Iranian drones. Meanwhile, new video overnight of Israel destroying a command center in Lebanon linked to the Iranian-backed terror organization Hezbollah. Scripps News senior international correspondent Jason Bellini has the latest on the conflict from Tel Aviv.
Maritza, here's what videos of the U.S. and Israel striking Iranian mobile missile launchers tells us and doesn't tell us about how long this war will go. Every time Iran rolls out a launcher, points it up and fires it, it risks giving itself away. Thermal spy satellites detect the ignition blast. Drones hunt them around the clock. It's working. Israel estimates it has destroyed roughly half of Iran's mobile missile launchers. The attacks are getting smaller, with longer pauses between them, and American and Israeli intelligence knows the location of many of the tunnels and bunkers housing Iran's remaining stockpile. They can be bunker busted, their entrances collapsed. But here's what these images don't tell us. Iran built what it calls missile cities, tunnels bored a quarter of a mile into mountain rock, with automated systems that move missiles to launch position without any detectable signature from space. We don't know what's in there. We don't know if Iran is holding back its best missiles, waiting. And what remains of the regime knows that it must keep hitting its enemies and advertising this capability with videos like this. If the missiles stop flying, the regime's claim to power stops with them. That's not a military calculation, that's an existential one. Maritza?
All right, Scripps News senior international correspondent Jason Bellini in Tel Aviv for us. Thank you so much for your reporting. And right now on the Hill, the House Armed Services Committee holding a hearing on U.S. defense strategy and posture. We've heard a lot about Iran. Let's take you back inside that hearing.
We've got 3 main things we're focusing on. One is the president's historic proposal for a $1.5 trillion defense budget. That is a massive signal of the seriousness with which he and we all take the situation, conscious of the resource issues that Mr. Smith mentioned, but that's a signal of how serious it is. Second, money is a critical predicate, but it's insufficient. We need to have better performance from defense industry, and that's why the president is convening defense industry leaders tomorrow. You have from the president, the secretary, the deputy secretary, Undersecretary Duffy was here yesterday. Absolute commitment to getting better performance, and I think you're seeing a lot of progress because we all need to know. We want to be able to get our services where there are unacceptable timeline delays. ways, but also green, our allies. And this is not a situation where they're picking and choosing and try to poke at people. We need everybody to be able to get what they need faster. And this, sir, is where I would turn it around to you and to the Congress, is where we all need to lean in together, also with our allies. This is where the conversation is. If I may say, some of the conversation in the last few minutes has been a little bit backward-looking. Where we are and where our allies' conversation is NATO 3.0, let's get down to business. For instance, we're talking very closely with the Germans about how they're about to make a very significant investments in defense. How do we scale that together to get the best outcome for both of us? Also recognizing that while we need American industry to be eligible in European and other markets, there's also going to be growth in the European and allied defense space, and that's actually to all of our benefit. That's where we're heading. I'm confident that under President Trump's leadership, we will be able to get through this transition, but we did need to have the clarity and continue to need to have that clarity. But if you look at Secretary General Rutte, he's singing from the same sheet of music as we all are.
Very good. Thank you. I'll reiterate, too, that the chairman's focus on this year's NDA is growing the industrial base to make sure we can do those things. We have to do that at the speed of relevance.
Support that as well, sir.
Mr. Chairman, with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Moulton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Colby, thank you very much for visiting my office for a long discussion last year. I appreciated that engagement. My reading of the NDS is that it clearly ranks threats around the world, putting the homeland first, deterring China second, and everything else a distant third. Is that accurate?
I think the homeland is obviously put first in the same way as it was in 2018. I think the first island chain is kind of the significant weight of effort the military focuses, as I said in my opening statement.
So the strategy also focuses quite carefully on the risk of simultaneity.
Yes, sir.
Meaning two simultaneous conflicts, either pre-coordinated or because an adversary takes advantage of us being tied down somewhere else. If that is a significant concern and China is the greatest threat, doesn't beginning a war in Iran not really help with deterring China?
I think the strategy is not saying that we're not going to do operations, and this happened under administrations of both parties. It actually specifically goes into that. It's saying we need to be prepared for this. Obviously, the things I mentioned, but also the allies and partners stepping up. And we do see that actually in the Middle East right now. We see Israel, the Gulf partners,
so one of the things
European
we discussed in my office was concerns about magazine depth, which you've heard both from this committee and the China committee. Are you concerned about that today in the Indo-Pacific?
I think I think we have anticipated this reality. We feel good about where we are.
Just to be clear, you anticipated a war with Iran.
No, we anticipated the need for dramatic action on. That's exactly what the strategy says under the president's leadership. Is we know we have very significant magazine depth across the force. That is also going to be able to support presidents of either party, et cetera, in the future, being able to use the military. But we need to get better performance, and that's why we're all leaning in on it.
You're not concerned about the number of missiles that we are using in Iran today?
I'm confident in the situation.
Okay, that is not a view shared by many of the officers who work in the Pentagon. So to confirm, just to be clear, you're arguing that fighting a war with Iran helps to deter China. Is that accurate?
Well, I think there's different debates about this. This is about the threat the Islamic Republic poses directly. That's sufficient for justifying the action. And we have a scoped objective, and right now, sir, and you know this from your distinguished military background, we have gotten through a lot of the preliminary campaign of bringing down the air defense, and now we're getting topic, and we're using, as the president indicated, a lot more of the munitions, which we have in very plentiful supply. So I think we're going to be in good shape. And this, sir,
So just to be clear, you think we're going to be in good shape for deterring China because we're bogged down in the Middle East with a war against Iran, and we're not using.
I think if we activate what the president and we are calling for, and with support from the Congress and better performance of the defense industry and better behavior and sort of contributions by allies, we're going to be in great shape.
So let me just ask, does that Operation Epic Fury deter China?
I think there's an argument that it can have some deterrent effect.
Yes or no?
What I do see is that
I know what we want to know. Do you view?
I can give you more specificity. We do see that others around the world, and conscious that we're in an open hearing, are very impressed by the prowess of the joint force and are.
But do you think, as someone who's focused on China for a long time,
absolutely,
do you think it deters?
It contributes to deterrence. Yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay, and yet for years you have argued that supporting Ukraine does not help deter China. So can you square that circle for us?
I can, because, I mean, first of all, I'm a public government official at this point. This document and this efforts by our administration are precisely to get ahead of a problem. That's what strategy is about. This administration is getting after the munitions problem under the president's leadership and the secretary's leadership, and we need help from Congress, Republicans and Democrats, to say not only the money, but better efforts by our defense. Ms. Jacobs and I were talking about this the other day. We need better performance by our defense industry. I think that's something that's shared across.
Mr. Colby, getting after our magazine depth problem is not shooting them all off in the Middle East. All right, I don't think that really helps. Now, look, you talk about a lot about burden sharing, And I think there's bipartisan agreement on the value of burden sharing. We might disagree on how we treat our allies, but we all want them to do our part. The NDS states the Department of War will empower regional allies and partners to take primary responsibility for deterring and defending against Iran and its proxies. Those are the words you wrote in the National Defense Strategy. How does the U.S. going to war with Iran represent our allies taking primary responsibility for the Iran threat?
Well, I think Israel is a pretty excellent example of the kind of ally we want that is taking, I mean, they're taking...
Oh, no, just to be clear, Secretary Rubio said that we are burden sharing for Israel because we started the war on their timeline. So I'm asking how our allies are burden sharing for us.
I'm sorry, can you say that again? Sorry.
I'm asking how our allies are burden sharing for us.
Well, I mean, Israel is obviously doing it. We see it from the Gulf partners where there's a lot of munitions depth, et cetera. So, and actually some of the European,
Let me just ask
Canadian
you,
Prime Minister said...
We're coming to the end. How many pages was your opening statement? I'll tell you, 1,700
11.
words, 177 sentences. You devoted one sentence to the war in Iran and not one word to the 6 soldiers who have been killed in action. Do you think that's appropriate today?
I have only the deepest respect for those soldiers and their families, sir.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, I recognize the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Stefanik.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. Mr. Colby, this is somewhat following up on previous questions. There's been public reporting as well as President Trump's statements on munition stockpiles, and my colleague, Mr. Moulton, touched upon this. Can you please give the department's assessment on munition stockpiles, what we can anticipate over the next year? I understand we're in an open setting, but the reason I'm asking the question is it will be Congress that appropriates and authorizes through a supplemental. So if you could lay out what you're able to in this open setting.
Sure, ma'am. And obviously we're in an open setting, but I think this obviously has our top priority.
All right, we are going to sneak in a commercial break here, but we will bring you back to this House Armed Services Committee hearing after the break.
He's part of the Scripps News Group. News teams from across the country.
Reporting in Detroit,
in Phoenix, in Tampa.
Connecting together to cover what's important to you. From the nation.
Big developments out of Washington today.
To your neighborhood.
For impacts across the country, we go to our Scripps News Group reporter in Cincinnati.
Ohio is already seeing the effect.
Rely on the reporting power of the Scripps News Group here on Scripps News.
It is 15 past the hour, and we are going to take you back inside the House Armed Services Committee hearing where they're questioning the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. Let's listen in.
At the end of the last administration about how our adversaries, quote unquote, were aligned to an unprecedented degree. And if you go back and you look at Henry Kissinger as something the standard for successful American foreign policy, you don't want everybody ganging up against you. And I think the president is very clear-eyed. Obviously, he's very realistic, but he's willing to engage in diplomacy from a realistic frame. And then our job is to provide that peace through strength approach, for instance, in the context of China.
Thank you. Yield back.
Again, ladies, time expired. Gentleman from California, Mr. Carbajal, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Colby, thank you for being here today. And finally coming to this committee. I think many of my colleagues in this room from both sides of the aisle agree that communication coming from the department to Congress has been lacking. Trump has consistently said his administration is the most transparent in history. And I assume that that is something you take to heart. I'm going to ask you a few questions, and if you could not filibuster and answer the questions as simple and straightforward as possible, I would appreciate it. How much does the department spend per boat strike in the Pacific and the Caribbean?
Sir, I don't have that information, so I'll get back to you on it.
How many pounds of fentanyl have been destroyed in these strikes?
My understanding is quite a bit, but I'll have to get back to you with a specific answer.
In total, how much has been spent to date on boat strike operations?
Sir, I'll have to get back to you with a specific answer.
Southcom and SOCOM did not have funding appropriated for these appropriations. What accounts were used for these operations?
Sir, I'll have to get back to you with an answer. Obviously, I'm not responsible for primarily for the budget.
Mr. Colby, is it safe to assume you were involved in decisions and discussions leading to Operation Epic Fury?
Sir, I've been involved in, most of these kind of policy and strategy-related decisions.
The president recently said he has a very beautiful plan for what comes next in Iran. For the sake of transparency and for us on this committee and the American people, could you please share what Trump's so-called beautiful plan is?
Well, sir, as I said earlier, my work is mostly in the Pentagon, so I, rely on, our secretary and the chairman who are over in the White House. I wouldn't add or say anything to presume to interpret the president's words, but we're paying a lot of attention to making sure, as he has instructed, that we have a good outcome and a sustainable, intelligent one that serves Americans' interests in a lasting way.
Mr. Colby, we're not getting some answers from you. We're getting a lot of rhetoric and oftentimes no answers to our questions, no information. In the National Defense Strategy, our allies are criticized for, and I quote, investing in domestic programs. To a majority of the world, investing in domestic programs is also known as governing and taking care of your citizens. And I get this criticism was made in the context of allies not investing enough in defense. But even when a country is doing everything right, they seem to be punished by this administration. Take the Baltic nations, NATO's eastern flank, for example. They have consistently led defense spending by GDP in Europe, each topping 3%. And despite this, the administration attempted to zero out programs like the Baltic Security Initiative. What else should a NATO ally be doing, in your opinion, if their commitment to defense spending isn't enough to have this administration support? Then
All right, we continue to hear lawmakers grill the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy in the House Armed Services Committee hearing on Capitol Hill. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
Watching Morning Rush on Scripps News. Coming up at noon, it's Scripps News on the Scene with live coverage and breaking news as it unfolds. Then at 5, watch Happening Now in America on Scripps News.
Instagram. So going over our head right now. I don't know if you can hear that, but I'm just like, what's about to happen next? You know?
In Dubai, thousands of miles from home, this Nashville home builder is surrounded by the sound of war. Missiles streak through the night air. The threat feels like it's closing in.
I am safe. We are safe.
28-year-old Abram Mitchell came to the country to celebrate his birthday. Now he's in one of 14 Middle Eastern countries. The State Department is urging Americans to leave immediately due to serious safety risk.
Is there about to be bombs just galore falling down? Are we going to be able to get out of here? Or?
What was supposed to be a week-long trip became an indefinite stay.
The airspace is closed down, so there's literally no way out right now. Yeah, there's no way out of here right now.
Mitchell says he feels safe in Dubai, but says the missiles flying above have been relentless.
There's been some strikes. You know, there's probably been like 700 missiles and drones shot over here. The UAE's air defense has done a very well job of intercepting 95% of them, but a few of them has hit.
One interception landed close enough he could feel it.
One of them dropped down right across the street from where I was staying at. had a big fire there.
Even inside his hotel, explosions shake the walls. The city, once buzzing with life, feels still and uneasy.
But very anxious. You know, every loud noise, you know, it make your heart drop immediately. It's just something that we haven't experienced in America.
Flight cancellations now stretch beyond the Middle East.
I mean, it's not just Americans, though. I mean, there's flights canceled to Egypt, to London, you know, because I've tried to get to London, you know, to fly to JFK. So there's a lot of people that's trapped, I would say, in Dubai.
Even the U.S. consulate hasn't been spared, hit by a drone. Mitchell called the embassy looking for help.
But I called the number and they said, you know, they can't help us right now.
And amid the chaos, he still thinks of those who have endured the worst.
My condolences to the people, the casualties that has been suffered, but it can be worse. It could definitely be a lot worse.
Kelsey Gibbs, Scripps News Group.
It's now been more than 72 hours since the U.S. launched a series of airstrikes against Iran. A response to a complex conflict, former CIA operations officer Joseph Assad says he's not surprised by.
The most telling that something was going to come is when we started hearing about how close Iran is to enrichment of their uranium. They bragged during these negotiations that they were at a 60% enrichment levels of their uranium. And nuclear experts will tell you that that meant that they're about 10 days to about 2 weeks away from being able to enrich up to 90%, which is required to make a nuclear bomb.
And from his experience, the decision to strike was not one that was reached lightly.
You know, you have something called HUMINT, that's human intelligence, and that is collected by sending people to the field and having sources in these locations. So we would intercept a phone call, for example, or, you know, people meeting somewhere and we happen to pick up the contents of that meeting. So you put these two together.
Having spent much of his time in the Middle East working in counterterrorism, Assad says Iran's retaliation to these attacks is something that worries him.
They have terrorist arms in Lebanon, in Iraq, in Yemen, and they have sleeper cells. They have agents all over the world. They will not go down without a fight. This is a regime that has killed and maimed thousands.
It's a reality in which he encourages people not to panic, but be vigilant.
Are we supposed to be paranoid? I said, no. When you go to an event, make sure you know where the exits are. Always know your surroundings and have a plan.
And not just with where they go, but with what information they consume.
Be a critical thinker. When you hear things in the news, when you read stuff mostly online and some of the social media, ask questions, research. Don't just believe a blurb here or there or a sound bite.
Joy Foltz, Scripps News Group.
Good morning. I'm Maritza Giorgio, and you're watching Morning Rush. Let's get you caught up on today's top stories. A federal judge has ordered the Trump administration to refund tariffs. On Wednesday, a trade court judge in New York ordered the government to start paying back more than $130 billion to importers. 2 weeks ago, the Supreme Court ruled that Trump's sweeping emergency tariffs were illegal. Since then, more than 2,000 lawsuits have been filed by companies looking to get their money back. Those include Costco, FedEx, and Pandora Jewelry. The Trump administration is expected to appeal that order. The House Oversight Committee voted to subpoena Attorney General Pam Bondi over the Justice Department's handling of the Jeffrey Epstein files. 5 Republicans joined Democrats to support that subpoena. The move shows continued frustration among conservatives with the department's review of documents related to the disgraced financier. Congresswoman Nancy Mace says the American people want answers on the Epstein files. The Justice Department concluded in July that no Epstein client list existed and said there was no reason to make additional files public. Ecuador and the United States have launched joint military operations against organized crime groups in the South American country. U.S. Southern Command announced the operations on Tuesday, but neither government provided really any details about the location or the scope. This move comes as Ecuador faces a sustained wave of violence linked to drug trafficking and illegal mining. It also comes as we are in a current conflict in Iran. President Trump's White House Ballroom project up for a final approval vote today. The National Capital Planning Commission is stacked with Trump loyalists, and its executive director is formally recommending approval here. The panel received 32,000 public comments, with almost all of them opposing the project. And the USPS is stopping mail deliveries to 18 destinations amid the war with Iran. Right now, customers can no longer send mail or packages to a list of countries including Israel, Kuwait, and the United Arab Emirates. USPS said the pause is tied to transportation and logistics disruptions, with reports linking the move to conflict-driven impacts in the Middle East. For mail already dropped off, USPS says employees will mark it mail service suspended, return to sender, and return it. All right, we want to take you back up to Capitol Hill now, where the Armed Services Committee is holding a hearing on U.S. defense strategy and posture, and Representative Don Bacon is questioning the undersecretary right now. Let's listen in.
This reads a lot like 1890s national security strategy. Western Hemisphere, spheres of influence, homeland security, as if we never fought a world war. It's as if we never had the Cold War. It's as if we never had the war on terror, where we had allies fighting with us in Iraq and Afghanistan. So I'll get to my first question. In the NDS, it does say there has to be clear accountability. Incentives work will be a critical part of our alliance. We will prioritize cooperation with model allies, those spending what they need to do and doing more against regional threats with critical but limited U.S. support. I can't figure out why the Pentagon said they didn't want to do the Baltic Security Initiative and also talk about withdrawing forces out of the Baltics when they lead the way. They have the highest level of defense spending. So why not be stronger for our Baltic friends?
Well, sir, I've seen your commentary, and one thing I must say I appreciate today is I think you rightly recognize this as part of from the president and the secretary on down. We all are thinking the same way, and so it's a total myth that we're not aligned with the president. I appreciate that your point and your questions, like Congressman Khanna's, they're straightforward. So I'll grapple with them in the same spirit that you offered, and I'm happy to come talk. I know we have different views and different views with many in the administration, but I appreciate the way you framed it, sir, and don't take it for granted. I would say, sir, from what it sounds like, I mean, this document and the national security strategy describing the president's approach, and I'll get to your question, sir, is flexible realism, is a practical approach. It sounds, I think it's a bit different than yours. In some ways, maybe yours has been in the ascendancy in the past, and we're trying to make a break, but we're not trying to con you about it. It's pretty straightforward. I recognize, obviously, your distinguished military service. This is more kind of grounded in military reality, almost like a more empirical, kind of dispassionate way, and less in the rhetorical style. Sir, one thing I would really stress on is we see ourselves as in line with the Cold War legacy and more of a break from the post-1989, when I think we got a bit hubristic, as the document says. We don't talk about spheres of influence. That's something that's put on us. And we can get into a discussion about the 1890s. I don't know. It's interesting. On Baltic Security Initiative, let me get back to you on the we are not trying to punish the Baltic states. The president has been clear that our wealthy allies should be prepared to step up. We're looking at this in a pragmatic way, with generally trying to get Europe moving the same direction. Just as your predecessor, sir, said about China, the goal with Russia is to avoid a war while we're, and to Mr. Turner's point about protecting NATO, but we got to do it in a militarily realistic way, and you know this very well, sir.
So my opinion is if Ukraine prevails, our world is a much darker, worse place. We're going to be spending a lot more money. We should be doing more in Eastern Europe, particularly helping out Ukraine right now with weapons, sanctions, but the president does not communicate that, and it's really, I think it's his biggest failure right now, because you look at every poll, you look at 30 different issues, Ukraine polls second worst or the worst in every poll, and it's because he communicates weakness. I hope you take that back to the president and the White House. Thank you.
Jim's time's expired. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Keating.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Colby, you said throughout this hearing that you're consulting with the president, the vice president regularly, great conversations. In fact, you said that you don't do, this is, I think, your earlier testimony today, you do not do anything not aligned with the president. So I have a question for you. In last July, it was reported that your office suspended U.S. weapons shipments to Ukraine, including but not limited to precision-guided rockets, 155 munitions, and Patriot missiles. And this risked Ukraine lives. It undermined our credibility, not just with Ukraine, but with our allies, the 50 countries that are part of this alliance. And it made it harder to get to an end to this war. And this decision seemingly took place out of nowhere. Now, this took place at your office, yet the president was asked about this a few days later in the Oval Office, and he denied making any order to suspend this. He said, I'll be the first to know. In fact, most likely I'll give the order, but I haven't done that yet. So the president, who you're in consultation with all the time and you're always aligned with, well, he disagreed with this. He said he didn't do anything. He said it didn't happen, even though it did. And it's your office. So tell us who made that decision. Did the president make the decision the way he alluded to, or did you make that decision? Now, the president said from the Oval Office that he didn't make that decision. So who did? Who made that decision that caused such great risk that I just outlined to you? Was it you, sir?
Would you like
Since
me to
it's
answer,
your
sir,
office.
or no? Yeah. Would you like me to answer or no, sir?
You're ready.
Okay. Well, let me just clarify something, sir. I'm particularly focused on my interactions with the secretary who interacts with the president. So just to be clear, not to overstate my access to the president, I wouldn't presume to do so. But obviously, we make a point of staying.
Well, you don't appear in concert with the president on this.
I'm aligned, totally aligned with presidential.
Well, then explain.
I can answer your question.
Explain how you weren't aligned in this instance.
Well, sir, I think we are aligned, and I'll get to that in a second. First of all, I'm not in the chain of command, so I can't order something, and I wouldn't.
It was your office. So tell me who made that suspension decision.
So there is a memorandum, as has been described before, that lays out a framework for making intelligent decisions.
No, I don't want this. Listen.
That the secretary can recommend to the president.
Getting something
and then, sir, what we've done, and
Please, I'm reclaiming my time, Mr. Chairman. Listen, you're getting a chance, maybe, that you're not getting all morning, to deal with a specific instance, a specific time that requires a clear-cut answer. So don't give me policy or framework.
Well,
I'm asking you, who the hell made that decision that endangered so many people's lives?
Sir, there's a memorandum.
Everyone's, you're like the 3 months. See no evil, hear no evil.
The alleged pause, we did not, I'm not in a position to order a pause. I didn't order.
Then who did?
Presume to order a pause. I don't actually know.
The president
I'm not
didn't,
sure
by his own
we can
admission.
get back to you with a more detailed answer.
How can you be in your position,
But one thing I can
in your
say,
office, sir? This is your office. This is your responsibility.
Right. I'm a policy
and you can't
advisor,
tell me
sir.
who made a decision like that jeopardized the lives of so many people.
The framework in the memorandum is not designed to.
I don't want the framework.
That's what we provide.
For a second.
And sir,
I asked you.
What I
didn't ask you about the framework. You're trying to talk over me.
It's
my
which has
question
provided
to you.
Ukraine in an ongoing way with weapons. In fact, sold by the United States in line with presidential intent, which I.
All right, let me move on here.
And I had the privilege to represent the Department at the UDCG last month.
You about the movement of troops just days before we were going to have something in the national and the NDAA. requiring consultation with us, but you moved 700 to 1,000 troops out of Romania. Why Romania?
Sir, we made the Secretary ordered a decision, obviously in line with presidential intent, to repurpose our forces based on.
Well, let me ask you a question because I'm running out of time. Let me ask you a question.
So,
are you have good conversations with the Vice President. Were you aware that the Vice President gave scathing attack on Romania about their elections in Munich? Did that have anything to do why Romania was singled out for these troops to be moved?
Sir, I'm not going to go into particular deliberations, but we make the decisions.
That's what you're
we make
here
the
for,
recommendations
sir. With all
to
due
the Secretary
respect,
and ultimately
you're
the
here
President.
in front of.
All right, we are hearing pretty pointed and direct questions from Representative Keating. They're asking about the movement of troops, 700 to 1,000 troops out of Romania, and if it had anything to do with some of the Vice President's comments. We are going to take a break. We'll be right back.
Scripps News, part of the Scripps News Group.
All right, let's get back up to Capitol Hill, where the House Armed Services Committee is holding a hearing on U.S. defense and strategy and posture, and Representative Ronnie Jackson questioning right now. Let's listen in.
Extremely important, and we're looking at burden sharing, not only with European allies and partners that have traditionally played a role. I had a conversation with the European Minister of Defense in Munich about this, but also in the Middle East and in Africa itself. I think there's a lot to do where we can kind of build up. We don't have to be the dominant figure in every initiative. We want people to take the initiative and address not only security threats, but obviously the things that matter often very much to Africans and others, to development and so forth.
Thank you. Under President Trump's leadership, the Department of War has returned its focus to putting America first, ensuring our warfighters have the capabilities necessary to fight and win, and advancing peace through strength. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the brave men and women of our joint force who, without their leadership, execution of the strategies discussed today would not be possible. And I thank you for your time. And with that, Mr. Crow, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Colby. I'll start with some very simple ones. You're the senior policy official within the Pentagon, correct?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
So you're familiar with the Uniform Code of Military Justice?
I would say I'm obviously familiar with it in generic terms. But
you're not a lawyer, but you're familiar with the uniform.
I went to law school, but I'm not a lawyer.
Okay, so you know how the law works. You are familiar with the law of armed conflict.
Again, I'm not an expert. I'm not in an official capacity. I'd want to be careful.
But you're familiar with the law of armed conflict.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. And it's you know that Congress's job is to conduct oversight of the executive branch, correct?
Certainly.
And that includes a responsibility to make sure that laws are being followed. Is that right?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. Do our soldiers get trained on the law of war?
My understanding is that they do.
Our service members get trained on the law of war.
I'm not an expert on that, but that's my understanding.
Do you believe that it's possible for an order to be unlawful, illegal?
I mean, yes, of course, yeah.
So there is a difference between lawful orders and unlawful orders?
Yes.
And you're a very bright person. You've studied history. You know history well. I've read a lot of your stuff. Okay. You're familiar that there has been in American military history instances of unlawful orders being given, correct?
Absolutely.
And service members refusing to abide by those lawful orders. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm not familiar with specific incidents when you're getting that level of specificity, but
there have been.
Yeah, imagine.
So is it a problem for somebody to say that a service member shouldn't follow an unlawful order?
Sir, this is not a matter I've been involved in, but I think there's a difference between recognizing those circumstances and taking action designed to
It's a pretty simple question. You said that there's a difference between lawful and unlawful orders. You said that you're familiar with the law of armed conflict. You admitted that it's the duty of this body to conduct oversight and to make sure that laws are being followed. You said that you're familiar with U.S. military history and that there have been unlawful orders given in our history. And then you're also familiar that service members have also refused to abide by those unlawful orders. So why can't you just say that service members shouldn't follow unlawful orders?
Sir, I think that's a different step to talk about, or in any
seems like a pretty logical step to me.
Encouragement, and that's not. I mean, we can refer to the Office of the General Counsel if you'd want to get into a legal matter. That's starting.
It's not a legal matter. It seems like a pretty. As the senior official at the Pentagon, responsible for establishing policy for our Department of Defense, it seems like a pretty basic thing to say, given what you just acknowledged and what we just walked through, that service members shouldn't follow illegal orders.
Well, I take the law of armed conflict and ensuring that we're being lawful and moral in our conduct very seriously. But I'm also, one thing that is not always reported in the public, I'm very conscious of what my responsibilities are and what they're not. And so if you like, I can get you an answer on that point. Happy to do so.
I think it's a problem that you can't state the obvious here. And I think moral clarity is important as a leader. And I think your lack of willingness to be morally clear in what is a pretty basic question, given what I asked you, is a real problem. Let me just pivot for a minute to Operation Epic Fury. You were involved in briefings in advance of the commencement of that operation, correct?
Can you be specific?
You were aware of the operation before it started, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Did the administration brief private sector officials, oil and gas executives, companies, businesses with interest in the Middle East before that operation commenced on Friday?
I'm not sure, Congressman. I can get an answer back to you then.
I will follow through. I want a commitment because it came to light after Venezuela that the administration actually briefed private sector companies, energy companies, before that operation, before briefing Congress. Right now, there are thousands of Americans stranded because there's no evacuation plan. I would like to know whether the administration took the time to brief private company executives, but didn't take the time to brief this oversight body and also make plans to evacuate civilians and our constituents.
Okay, that is Representative Jason Crow of Colorado questioning the Undersecretary about Operation Epic Fury, asking if the administration briefed private sector officials before briefing Congress. Before that, we also heard him asking clarification questions about unlawful orders versus lawful orders. Of course, he was part of that video of 6 lawmakers that caused the president to lash out against them. We will be right back, and we'll get back into this hearing.
We all know the war with Iran has lots of implications, like higher gas prices, but it's also going to impact Kentucky's agriculture. Spring is around the corner, and Kentucky's agriculture season will soon be in full swing.
I'm a very passionate and giving industry.
But for farmers, the climate overseas will have an impact here in the Bluegrass. The conflict with Iran is bringing ships in the Strait of Hormuz to a halt. According to the American Farm Bureau Federation, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Iran together make up 25% of the world's nitrogen fertilizer exports. Brian Conlon with Fayette County Farm Bureau says the stalled shipments of the key ingredients will drive fertilizer demand up.
Today, yesterday, and probably tomorrow, you cannot buy a truckload, a carload, a barge load of fertilizer. The market is just very much in a wait and see.
Robert Cleveland has been with Woodford Feed since 1968, building connections with farmers. Cleveland knows the profit margin isn't much.
We've got a good relationship with our farmers and so forth. I'm not so much worried about, can they pay me, but I'm worried about, is this going to cost too much where they can't make money?
And if farmers can't make money?
As prices go up and farmers get squeezed, they quit producing.
Conlon has been around agriculture his entire life. He says this is another obstacle they will have to overcome.
It's frustrating. You know, it's talking about a class of individuals that need a win. That's failed to happen in a long time.
Alex Barber, Scripps News Group.
After the break, a live look at today's top stories.